No one ever thinks it will happen to them. That's what I told myself anyway, as I stared at the wedding photo on our living room wall. The smiles on our faces, the bright future ahead, those memories felt like someone else's life now. I wanted to believe in that version of us, to cling to the image of love and trust we had built over the years. But the cracks were there, and they had been for a long time. I married Olivia because she made me believe in something bigger than myself. Her laughter could light up a room, and her ambition was contagious. We met in grad school, both studying architecture, and our shared late-night brainstorming sessions turned into something more. By the time we graduated, we were inseparable. We started a firm together, built a life together. When we said I do, I thought we'd conquered every challenge that could come our way. But love isn't a shield against time, stress, or the quiet erosion of trust. The first signs were so subtle that I dismissed them. Olivia had always been a hard worker, but lately, her hours seemed endless. Another late night, she'd text, and I'd brush it off. After all, I knew what it was like to pull all-nighters to meet deadlines. But then the late nights turned into overnight stays at client sites. She'd come home looking more refreshed than exhausted, with vague excuses that didn't quite add up. I told myself she was just dedicated, that I was overthinking things. We both knew how competitive the industry could be. Maybe she was just trying to prove herself. But deep down, the doubt began to grow. It wasn't until I found the receipt that I started to question everything. I was cleaning out the car one weekend, something Olivia usually took care of, when I stumbled upon it. A dinner for two at an upscale restaurant we'd never been to. The date on it was a night she'd claimed to be working late. When I asked her about it, she didn't flinch. "Oh, that was with a client," she said. "You know how it is, keeping them happy." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that the woman I had built my life with wouldn't lie to me. So I let it go, telling myself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I started noticing patterns. The sudden unexplained expenses on our joint account, hotels, meals, tickets to events I knew we hadn't attended together. The way she'd smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, typing out long messages and laughing softly at the replies. When I asked her who she was talking to, she'd say it was just a friend from work. Then came the missed anniversaries and forgotten plans. On our 10th wedding anniversary, I made a reservation at the same little Italian place we went to on our first date. Olivia called me an hour before, apologizing profusely. "Something came up with a client," she said. "I can't get out of it." I spent that night alone, pushing food around my plate, staring at the empty seat across from me. The waiter gave me a pitying smile as he brought the check. It wasn't just the missed milestones. It was the emotional distance. Olivia stopped sharing her day with me. Our once-long conversations over dinner dwindled to one-word answers. "How was work?" I'd ask. "Fine," she'd reply, barely looking up from her phone. And then there were the lies, small at first, but more frequent over time. She told me she had a conference in Chicago, but when I called her hotel, they said she wasn't registered. She claimed her phone died during a weekend trip, but I found her charger in her suitcase. Every excuse chipped away at the trust we once had, leaving me feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. The final straw came on a rainy Thursday evening. Olivia was supposed to be working late again, but something told me to go by her office. Maybe I just wanted to surprise her, to bring her dinner and show her that I still cared. Or maybe I was hoping to prove to myself that I was wrong, that all my doubts were just paranoia. But when I arrived, the office was dark. No one was there. I drove around the city, unsure of where to go or what to do. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she with a client? A colleague? Someone I didn't know? I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. When Olivia came home that night, I confronted her. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice trembling. She looked at me, her expression carefully neutral. "I told you I had a late meeting. I went to your office," I said. It was empty. No lights, no one there. "So tell me, Olivia, where were you?" Her calm facade cracked for just a moment before she recovered. "I must have left just before you got there," she said. The meeting was off-site. I didn't believe her. Not anymore. But I didn't have proof, just a collection of inconsistencies and a growing pit in my stomach. I started to keep a closer eye on things. I checked our accounts more carefully, tracked the time she said she'd be at work versus when she actually came home. I even considered hiring a private investigator, though the thought made me feel sick. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't who we were supposed to be. But the doubts consumed me. One night, when she was asleep, I found her phone on the nightstand. It was locked, of course, but I noticed a notification flash across the screen. A message from a number I didn't recognize. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my brain. I knew in that moment that everything I feared was true. When Olivia woke up, I was sitting in the living room, holding her phone. She walked in, rubbing her eyes, and froze when she saw me. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice cautious. I held up the phone. "Who's texting you this?" Her face went pale. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice shaking. She sat down across from me, tears welling in her eyes. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far." I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain I was feeling. But all I could do was sit there, numb, as she confessed. She told me about the coworker, how it started as harmless flirting, how it escalated into something more. She swore it was over, that she had ended it weeks ago. "I love you," she said, reaching for my hand. "I love our life. Please, give me a chance to make this right." But I couldn't look at her. I couldn't believe her. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built my life with, had betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. "I need time," I said finally, standing up. "I need space." That night, I slept on the couch. The walls of our home, once filled with laughter and love, now felt cold and suffocating. I lay awake, wondering how we had gotten here, how everything had gone so wrong. I knew this was only the beginning. I barely recognized my life in the days that followed. The home I once considered my sanctuary had become a battlefield of unspoken words and shattered trust. Olivia tried, in her way, to make amends. She flooded me with apologies, texts throughout the day asking how I was, and long heartfelt messages claiming she'd do whatever it took to fix us. But it was too late. The image of that message on her phone, the whispered calls she'd thought I wouldn't hear, and the late nights that suddenly made sense, none of it could be erased. No matter how many times she promised it was over, the foundation of our marriage was cracked beyond repair. We started counseling, at her insistence. I didn't go because I thought it would save us. I went because I needed answers. I needed to understand how the woman I had loved for so long could have done this. In those sessions, Olivia spoke about feeling isolated, about how our busy lives had drifted us apart. She said she hadn't felt truly seen by me in years. "I'm not saying it's your fault," she told me in one session, her voice trembling. "But I was lonely. And he gave me something I didn't realize I was missing." I sat there, silent, as she poured out her guilt and regret. But all I could think about were the nights I stayed late at work to give us a better future, the weekends I spent making sure our home life ran smoothly so she wouldn't have to stress. I had thought I was doing everything I could. Yet in her eyes, it wasn't enough. The anger came next. I didn't yell, didn't scream, but inside, I was seething. I wanted to throw the counselor's notebook against the wall when Olivia said, "I've changed. I'm not that person anymore." Because how could she say that so soon after destroying our trust? I told her as much one night. We were sitting at the dining table, the counselor's words still fresh in my mind. "You say you've changed, Olivia, but it's only been a few weeks. How can I believe that?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Because I'm trying," she said. "I've cut him off completely. I've blocked him on everything. I'm here, aren't I? I'm showing you I'm committed." "But I can't see it," I said, my voice low. "All I see is what you did. All I see is you laughing at his messages while I was sitting right here, wondering what I did wrong." Her face crumpled, and she reached out for my hand. I pulled away, the distance between us growing. Over the following months, we went through the motions. Counseling sessions, attempts at date nights, forced conversations about how to rebuild. But the trust never came back. Every time her phone buzzed, my stomach dropped. Every time she said she was running late, I questioned if she was really working late or if she was with someone else. The final blow came during one of our last counseling sessions. The counselor asked Olivia what steps she thought were necessary to regain my trust. She listed off the usual things: being transparent, spending more quality time together, continuing therapy. But then she added something that made me freeze. "And I think John needs to work on forgiving me," she said softly. "Because without that, we'll never be able to move forward. I stared at her, unable to believe what I'd just heard. Forgive her? After everything? The weight of those words hit me like a punch to the chest. I don't know if I can, I said quietly. I don't know if I'll ever be able to. She looked at me, tears spilling down her cheeks. Please don't give up, she whispered. But I already had. I just hadn't admitted it out loud yet. The day I told her I wanted a divorce was one of the hardest days of my life. She was standing at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, when I walked in. I waited until she turned around, and then I said it. I can't do this anymore, Olivia. I want a divorce. She froze, her hands still wet from the sink. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. No, John, please don't say that. We've come so far. We've been trying. I've been trying. But I'm not, I interrupted. I'm not trying anymore. Because I don't believe it will work. I don't think I'll ever look at you the same way again. And I don't want to keep living like this, wondering, doubting, hurting. She stepped closer, her voice desperate. We can keep going to counseling. We can keep working on it. I'll do anything. I know you will, I said, cutting her off again. But it's not enough. You can't change what happened, Olivia. You can't make me forget. And I can't keep pretending that I'll ever trust you again. Her sobs filled the room, and I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it almost brought me to tears. But I stood my ground. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and hard conversations. We agreed to split everything fairly, to keep things as civil as possible. Olivia moved out, taking only what she needed, and I stayed in the house. The silence that followed was deafening. For months, I lived in the aftermath of her betrayal. I kept to myself, focused on work, and tried to piece my life back together. I stopped checking my phone constantly, stopped wondering what she was doing. The wounds were deep, but I knew they would eventually heal. One day, I met someone new. She was kind, patient, and honest in a way I hadn't experienced in years. She didn't ask about my past, didn't push me to move faster than I was ready. With her, I found something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. Looking back now, I see that Olivia's betrayal, as devastating as it was, taught me something important. It taught me to value honesty, to recognize the signs of a drifting relationship before it's too late, and to never settle for less than I deserve. Years later, I'm happier than I ever thought I could be. The scars remain, but they've faded. I've found peace, love, and a future I can finally look forward to. And for that, I'm grateful.